Hello, thanks for being in a new video. This time we have a full review of the Huawei Nova 11 Pro. Let's get started. This device is from Huawei's mid-premium range. It undoubtedly offers very good specifications, although, as we all know, with some limitations that could reduce its potential number of users. That's why I recommend these devices more for tech enthusiasts who are not so afraid of installing apps from external sources and this kind of details. But later on, I will tell you little by little everything that is coming here. First, to begin with, let me tell you about its price, which in Mexico is 12,999 pesos. On the screen, you have the reference price in dollars. Although remember that the prices here are not the same as there. Huawei also offers an edition with a surprise package at 15,999 pesos in case you want to take some extra gift from Huawei. The price seems competitive to me. In the description, I leave you some purchase links in case you are interested. And now, join me to know it point by point. We start by taking a look at the front because we are definitely in front of a device that looks very modern and looks totally premium due to the curved glass screen that integrates. But not only does it have a nice look, it also has advanced materials. As here, it integrates Kunlun glass, the ultra-resistant glass that Huawei introduced with last year's premium range series. Therefore, it not only offers good aesthetics, but also offers good resistance. This glass resists very well, but here is a drop test for you to see for yourself. It offers us a front with a very high utilization as the bezels are too small, and it is not only the upper bezel but also the lower bezel which has a very important reduction. On the right side we have the power button with a red highlight, and we also have volume buttons. On the top side we have microphone and speaker, and on the left side we have absolutely no buttons, but it serves to tell you that we have a thickness of 7.88 millimeters, being a very stylish device. But the most stylish, without a doubt, is the back cover, which in this edition that I have in my hands is made of vegan leather in the color jade green. It's also available in gold black, but note perfectly how the Nova monogram is all over this cover with a little bit of embossing, so even to the touch it feels great in the hand. And honestly, the aesthetics are very original, as there are very few devices on the market that offer you a look of this style. In addition, the fact that the back cover is made of vegan leather also gives it very good resistance, so if you drop it, you won't break the back cover. And since it has Kunlun glass on the front, I think I would dare to use this device without a case. However, you can tell it's not yet a flagship device since the frames are plastic with a metallic look, but in the rest of the materials, it's very good. You will even notice that it is a lightweight device as it weighs only 188 grams. So once again, the design of this Huawei device is one of its strongest points. The only thing that would remain outstanding would be water and dust resistance, because this device does not integrate any such certification. The screen is 6.78 inches and it is going to offer us a very high visual quality due to its OLED technology with a refresh rate of up to 120 Hz. Thanks to this display technology, we have super high contrast with totally deep black color and very vivid colors, plus excellent viewing angles. So definitely the display, from whatever angle you look at it, is going to be very good quality, and even with very good brightness. The level of detail is also very good because it has full HD plus resolution of 2652 by 1200 pixels. So small text will also be well displayed. The maximum brightness is considerably high to comfortably use the device outdoors, and the minimum brightness is also very low so that at night you can use it without any fatigue. In addition, remember that it integrates traditional functions such as dark mode and also a visual rest mode that you can enable manually. It also has an option to reduce screen flicker and has an ebook mode that will put everything in grayscale for comfortable reading. You can also choose your favorite color calibration in case you want more saturated or more natural tones, as well as adjust the color temperature. The display can go up to 120 Hz. But thanks to its smart setting, it can be interacting between 60 or 120 in order to be battery efficient. It's still not as advanced a display with LTPO technology as what we would see on a top-of-the-line device, but it still seems to me to have very good features. And one of the things I like most about this display is that it supports HDR content, even in the same pictures that you've taken. I don't know if through the camera you can tell, but when I open up a photograph of this style, the more brightly lit areas of the photograph are also more brightly lit on this screen to give it a much more superior realism to all the photographs that we view. So, really, the experience is very good. Now you're about to listen to an audio fully recorded with the microphones on this device.
Esta es una prueba para que puedas notar la grabación que podemos tener, que en este caso sí es compatible con una grabación estéreo. Tú mismo estás escuchando qué tal suena el audio captado con estos micrófonos.
As you notice, it only offers us 2 microphones, unlike some other manufacturers that in the same price range do offer us a third microphone in order to reduce noise or also in order to direct the audio as best as possible towards your mouth when you're holding the device when playing, or even others use the third microphone to try to direct the audio when you zoom. This device is limited to the basics, stereo sound recording, and that's it. Perhaps this could be one of its weak points compared to some of its competitors. And with respect to the speakers, we also find 2. In this case, the main speaker is at the bottom and the secondary speaker is at the top, along with the earpiece for calls. So we do have stereo sound that is of very good quality. In fact, I like the bass presence. It's a well-balanced sound, although it doesn't stand out as a loud sound. Just the volume is normal, but the quality is really very good. How about listening to a little test? Although remember that it's not the same to listen to it live. Regarding wireless audio, fortunately, it does have support for advanced codecs such as LDAC, which will allow you to enjoy high-resolution audio with compatible headphones. However, remember that we don't have a headphone jack if you want to connect a wired headphone while charging the phone, so you will have to use an adapter with the USB-C port if you want to connect wired headphones. Also remember that the Huawei Histon functions will only be available when you have headphones connected, and through them you can have a kind of surround sound depending on the setting you like the most, and you can also access a 10-band equalizer with a bass amplifier included, and various presets are also available. However, it would be much better if all these functions could be used without the need to connect headphones. So here there is still a good point of improvement on the part of Huawei that hopefully with an update they can integrate it. This is one of the few devices to integrate 2 front cameras. The main one is 60 megapixels with f2.4 aperture, and then we will have a special camera for portraits with optical zoom. It is 8 megapixels with f2.2 aperture. The optical zoom is 2x, so it's very interesting. I don't know if it's that widely used, but Huawei focuses it a lot on women who want to see how their makeup is looking. As usual, Huawei enables portrait mode when you enter the front camera, and we have various distances and magnifications with this selector. As you notice, we can have optical zoom and we can reach a digital zoom of up to 5x. As I tell you, Huawei highlights it to see the details of the makeup. It also has a beauty mode that has different parameters such as unifying the skin, refine the face, and select a different tone. And in portrait mode, it also has some blur effects. The capture speed is not the fastest, but I couldn't consider it a slow capture either. However, you can't enable a burst by holding down the shutter, and it also doesn't have an easy capture mode by showing the palm. What it does have is sound control by mentioning a keyword or speaking loudly. It also has the option to capture by detecting smiles, and you can also place the shutter where you want it in case it is too awkward to reach the main shutter. So we do have some tools to make capturing easier as well, but personally I do wish they would integrate palm capture. What I like most about this camera is the tremendous range it has. It really ensures that you can have a picture with a large group of friends without any problems. The only nitpick I see is that viewing these photos on the cell phone screen itself seems to give a paler color experience than what you see on other devices. I don't know why that happens, but in general, the photos when I review them on other devices seem to me to have good color. However, if I review them on the Nova 11 Pro screen, I feel like the color is very pale. This camera has autofocus, although oddly in this photo, it doesn't seem to have focused on my face well. However, it's a nice feature. Remember that it offers optical zoom, so you can notice a lot of details of your face. You can even go up to 5x digital zoom if you want to notice even more detail of your skin. In backlight, the preview still doesn't look optimized, but it does have automatic HDR and manages to balance highlights and shadows perfectly. In fact, it was a pretty extreme backlit condition, and overall I think it did an excellent job. The device also has a panorama mode for the front camera, which I don't see as necessary because of how wide the camera already is. If you take a portrait picture with the ultra-wide camera setting, it won't do any blur. But if you choose the zoom lens, it will do blur. However, you have to zoom the camera out too far to get a good result. And the objects, it doesn't keep them in focus. Fortunately, it does allow you to choose a 1x setting to have a portrait picture that is not so close, but it still has the same detail of not keeping the objects in focus. And you will also notice that the color rendering between this camera and the optical zoom camera is very different. At night, the result will be very good if we have a close light source. Even backlit, it still performs very well at night, and in extreme lighting conditions, it's also going to give you a good result. In fact, it is also capable of illuminating the screen to simulate the flash and better illuminate the face. Although the picture may come out with a very strange color balance if the lighting you have is warm due to the screen emitting a cooler light. However, I can tell you that it takes very good pictures, especially if you use the night mode. The rear photographic system is composed of the main camera of 50 megapixels with f1.9 aperture, and we also have an ultra-wide-angle camera of 8 megapixels with f2.2 aperture, which at the same time is a macro camera, so it offers autofocus. Even though it looks like you have 3 cameras on the module, actually the third black dot is a laser for much more efficient and faster autofocus. So one very positive thing is that here we don't see any useless cameras as we might see in other mid-range devices. The capture speed is slightly faster than the front camera, but in this case, if we hold down the shutter, yes, we can initiate a burst. Although note that the burst is quite slow and takes a long time to start, so the burst experience is not really good, and hopefully they can improve it through an update. Remember that this device integrates artificial intelligence that you can enable or disable as you want, and you can also select some color filters that you can't preview in real time unless you tap on them. If you tap on screen, you can regulate the exposure, but you also have access to a professional mode where you can move more parameters like the type of metering, the ISO, which can go up to 409,600. This is one of the most advanced features that this device has thanks to its RYYYB sensor, so it will be very good taking night shots. We can also modify the shutter speed up to 30 seconds, also the compensation, the focus, the white balance, and this device also lets us take pictures in RAW for a later, more advanced development. From the automatic mode, it does not allow you to scan documents, but you can access a special document mode to automatically detect the edges and crop them to have a more accurate picture. Although there are times when it might detect the edges incorrectly, but you can manually adjust them anyway. And this is saved as an image and not as a PDF, maybe that could be improved as well. This device doesn't include a QR code scanner from the main camera interface, but it does have a shortcut to the AI lens feature so you can do this action. The capture speed offered by this device is good, so it does allow you to capture the exact moment with relative ease. Just remember that in burst mode, it definitely starts very late, so in this case I had already run past and then the device took the picture. Through the high resolution mode, you can take pictures with 50 megapixels. However, I do have to tell you that I don't feel it is very well optimized for detail level. I feel that there are other devices that try to preserve all this detail better, even though it has an artificial intelligence mode. Outdoor pictures, you will notice that they have good colors, good level of detail, although they are not free of chromatic aberration like most mobile devices. Although in this case it will not be as high. Indoors, I find it manages to pick up very good lighting due to its RYYYB sensor, maintaining good color saturation as well. In backlit conditions, you will notice that it doesn't have an optimized preview, and even after taking the picture in my tests, it didn't make a good balance of highlights and shadows. This should be corrected through an update. In the evenings, the photographic result looks positive to me, but in some scenarios, I could even say it is bad. Notice this photograph how the black sky actually turned into a very unpleasant green coloration. I feel this device still needs a lot of updates to correct all these problems. If you use the night mode, this goes away, and I actually really like the result you get with night mode because of all the level of detail and texture you get to distinguish. But again, there are times when the coloration can even turn purple in the darkest scenes. But with night mode, the result is spectacular. And in very dark scenes, I must tell you that the device is able to pick up a lot of illumination thanks to its RYYYB sensor and its good aperture. Although the coloration is perhaps a little warmer than I would like, but the scene was really dark because it had no direct lighting. This is the result you would achieve using flash, having a little more realistic color, but with very aggressive shadow generation. This is the result you would get in this type of scenario with the ultra-wide camera, which still manages to do a very remarkable job, but definitely here it's much more noticeable that we were in a much darker condition. Now you're looking at a reference photograph to analyze the zoom. Even though all the zoom is digital, in the 2x digital zoom photograph, it seems to me that we don't have a good level of detail. In fact, it feels low on this level of detail. But notice how at 5x we have a very good level of detail, not only in the letters and symbols, but even in the grass and the texture of the trees. Finally, the maximum it gets is 10x, and it seems to me that the zoom is fine, but it is not one of its strongest or most outstanding points. Here we have another example of the zoom now applied to an object, and observe how at different distances we can appreciate different types of optimization for this level of detail, but in general we could say that it has an acceptable zoom. Now you are looking at a reference photograph prior to analyzing the ultra-wide camera. This ultra-wide camera does give us very good range, so in that sense it meets its objective. However, the quality of the lens does not seem to be very good as it generates too much chromatic aberration, giving us a quality that does not go according to the price of the device. Remember that you can also take panoramic pictures, but only using the main camera, although fortunately it maintains a very good level of detail in this type of photographs with so much amplitude. Macro photography is one of the aspects I like most about this device, as it generates a very nice blur to have an intense bokeh effect in the background, while maintaining good color and good level of detail in the foreground. In fact, you can apply a bit of digital zoom to get even more intense textures. And remember that you can also get much closer if you want to use the ultra-wide camera with a super macro mode to notice even more of these tiny details. Finally, portrait photography is something I also really liked on this device, having a very nice blur in the background with a nice bokeh effect and also keeping in focus the objects that are in the foreground. In fact, it also allows you to take portrait photography with a 2x digital zoom setting and even with a 3x setting, maintaining a good level of detail, although if you get closer you can clearly notice that it is digital zoom, but the result is very good. Video recording can go up to 4K at 30 frames per second, and also the ultra-wide camera supports this high resolution. However, if you want to record at 60 frames per second, you must downgrade to full HD resolution, and the ultra-wide camera no longer supports this frame rate. Fortunately, the front cameras also support this 4K resolution. But if you want to record at 60 frames per second, the optical zoom camera will not be available. When recording video, we are going to have a convenient slider for zoom, but we don't have some presets to jump directly to a desired setting. We can also take snapshots of this video, and we can turn on the flashlight while we are recording the video. We can also pause and resume the content. And what I like the most is that it lets us rotate to the front camera without stopping our recording, and this is a feature that very few devices integrate. That's why I think it is one of its strongest points. In fact, the device also integrates a beauty mode, although the resolution is set to full HD. Remember that it also integrates a vlog recording mode, where we have some additional effects that I will tell you about later. It even also has a multi-camera mode, which is able to connect to other Huawei cell phones to have a multi-camera feature wirelessly. This is another of its strong points because Huawei phones are the only ones with this feature. Notice how in this case I am not using the camera of this cell phone, but I am using the camera of the Nova 11. So I could record a video, and while I'm recording, I can change the angle to now select the camera of this phone and then switch back to the front camera of the Nova 11. So definitely that this is very advanced. In fact, Huawei also has a professional recording mode where we can move pretty much the same parameters that we saw in the picture. Only in this case, the ISO is limited up to 6400. One positive thing about this device is that it does have 4K recording available, although there are times where it can feel a little less fluid than we would like. On the plus side though, it doesn't have aggressive exposure jumps, but the white balance doesn't seem to be as stable. So it's not a specialist in video recording. Fortunately, indoors it still maintains a good light input to have good colors. However, here again we see a slightly inconsistent white balance. In backlit scenes, I find it a spectacular performance that we have achieved. That's why I insist that the picture that came out very bad should be corrected with some update. Although in this case it jumps a bit aggressively when it detects or fails to detect a face, and even the focus can suffer a bit. But speaking specifically about the light and shadow balance, it can become quite advanced for the price. At night, it also does a very good job of reducing noise. This is thanks to its RYYYB sensor in conjunction with a good aperture. In some sudden movements, it is possible that the noise may become a little more intense, but the device is constantly trying to reduce that noise, and the result, I think, is positive. It's just worth noting that the video temperature is not as accurate on the main camera, but when you switch to the ultra-wide camera, you do notice this warm color temperature that we had in the environment. So it seems that in that sense, it could still improve in color accuracy in video recording. However, recording in dark scenes seems like a task that it could get easier, although the ultra-wide camera can pick up a lot more noise, unlike the main camera. This device does not have any more advanced stabilization modes, so we have to settle for optical and digital stabilization, which for walking I think is fine, but for running it will not be enough because the movements will be much more abrupt and it is not able to compensate them in a good way. In this recording where we tested the zoom, you can really notice how the chromatic aberration of the ultra-wide camera is very drastic. Specifically, speaking again about the zoom, you will notice that despite having a good range, it does not have a good level of detail. Also, you will notice that the range is not very high, reaching only 6x, although fortunately it maintains good stabilization, but the level of detail is very low. The focus is definitely very fast thanks to the laser it has for this lens. So, the laser is well used here, especially in sudden movements. However, in movements a little more useful, it could get confused, especially if it is a little small object. But you can always touch the screen to try to adjust it as best as possible. This device also integrates a portrait recording mode to blur the background, although it looks a bit artificial, especially because of the edge detection. If you're not moving, it may go slightly unnoticed, but the more movement there is in the scene, the more it's going to be noticeable. Also, it's not able to change the intensity of the blur depending on the distance I'm at, so it doesn't feel as natural. Fortunately, it does maintain good stabilization, but it is not able to keep objects in focus, giving an unnatural result. Plus, the edges look quite cloudy. This device can record slow motion at 120 frames per second with full HD resolution. Something good considering the price range, but nothing spectacular. 240 frames per second is also available, but the resolution drops down to HD. The slowest setting is 960 frames per second, having a super slow motion. However, again only with HD resolution, so the level of detail is very low, and even the focus suddenly moves a bit jerky and you feel some interpolated frames. The fast camera is with automatic adjustment about 15x. It does not maintain good stabilization, although at least it does display at a bit high bit rate. The front camera does allow us to record in 4K, which is very positive, maintaining good stabilization. And what I like most is all the range we have, because for blogging it can be a very useful tool. However, again, I find the color a bit pale compared to reality. And as for the backlit environment, you'll notice that unlike the photograph, here it fails to make a good balance of light and shadow, as it gives full priority to illuminate the face. Also, note that we can do some digital zoom, but if we switch to the camera with optical zoom, the color rendering is too reddish, very inaccurate, giving a rather strange result. The level of detail will obviously be good compared to other front-facing cameras, as it's generally not common to let you zoom in. However, the color is really quite bad, although this could be corrected with an update. What's also remarkable is that it has autofocus, so you could very well zoom in on an object. That's why I say it's a camera that I think is very good for blogging. Indoors, curiously, the colors seem to me a little more intense than outdoors. It's a little strange behavior, but you'll also notice a little more noise present in the video. And finally, at night, there will be even more noise. Even the focus can suffer a little more, and although it tries to reduce noise, it is still very noticeable in the darker areas, in addition to having a stabilization that is not so remarkable. So that's the price to pay for having such a large camera. Generally, whenever you have a very wide camera, you have less light coming in. This will be the perfect example for this. Notice how when I turn off the light, there is much more noise present and little light input, although fortunately it allows you to use the screen as a flash simulation to brighten you up. It also integrates front-facing slow motion in full HD at 120 frames per second should you see the need, and can even go up to 240 frames per second if you lower the resolution to HD. The fast camera will also have an automatic setting which is 15x. Personally, I feel it is too fast and would prefer a manual setting. And finally, within the vlog mode, we also have this dual recording mode that can feel slightly choppy at times, but fortunately it does allow us to move this frame to the position we want, although it doesn't let us resize it. Fortunately, the camera still has autofocus and allows us to zoom in as well as switch between the ultra-wide camera and the main camera. So, the experience can actually be quite good recording in this mode, although the video doesn't feel as fluid. It also allows us to dynamically switch to a split screen mode without the need to stop our video recording. So if it had more fluidity, it would be a perfect recording because it responds well, but it does feel a bit choppy at times. In fact, it also allows us to switch and record with the ultra-wide camera and the main camera at the same time, or with the front camera and the front zoom camera at the same time, again targeting possibly beauty bloggers. This device globally comes with EMUI 13 as its operating system. However, Huawei does not guarantee you any clear update policy. However, due to Huawei's good update history, we could say that it is going to be well supported for several years. However, these are not updates that will arrive that quickly. Remember that Huawei currently has its own operating system, which also uses its own mobile services, so it doesn't come with anything from Google installed. However, it doesn't mean that you won't be able to use anything from Google. As you can see, I have the Google Search app installed here. I would also have YouTube and other applications installed here. However, as I told you at the beginning of the video, I would recommend this device only if you consider yourself a tech enthusiast, because the installation might not be the easiest way possible. However, you might get to use several of Google's features. Although let's be clear, the experience on some features will not be exactly the same as what you find on Android devices. However, it can become usable. As usual, here Huawei integrates some traditional features of the brand, such as double tap with the knuckle to take screenshots. Exactly the same thing you can do, but with two knuckles to initiate a video capture. Although it must be said that this capture is not very high resolution. Although the screen is full HD+, it actually captures the video in HD+. Hopefully this will be improved with an update. With the knuckle, you could also capture some specific areas. Remember that Huawei also offers the floating windows mode in a very comfortable way. Since this window, we can move it along the entire screen, although it only allows us to open one application at a time in this format. Unlike some other brands that do allow us to open more applications in a floating window mode. Fortunately, YouTube does support this mode. Remember that split screen mode is also available, also in a very easy and simple way. And finally, remember that we also have available the Super Hub, that is to drag content, and these elements will be synchronized between all your Huawei devices so that, for example, these photos, you can paste them directly on your computer. Also in the photo editor already has an intelligent eraser of objects. So you only have to touch the object you want to delete and that's it. You can also choose the object manually to make this deletion more specific. And finally, remember that this device also has the always on display function with different covers, as you can notice. We can also add our own images and create our own cover art if we want to give it a more specific customization touch. Even some covers have animations. So the software seems to me to be very well developed. It is a very stable software, although with the lack of Google services that some people might find very annoying. This device has a fingerprint reader inside the screen that is located a little bit down. I think the placement is good, but it is an optical fingerprint reader, so it is not as fast as ultrasonic readers. However, the fact that it is placed behind the screen gives it a much more modern touch than devices that have this reader on the outside. It allows you to register up to 5 different fingerprints, and you can also change the animation, although it does not have as many options available. It also integrates facial recognition, although it is only in 2 dimensions, so if your priority is security, it is not recommended that you use it. If you want a more comfortable experience, you can enable smart unlocking so that while it is connected to some Bluetooth devices, it will not ask for your code again. It also integrates advanced features such as application locking so that in case you have borrowed your unlocked phone, you have a second security filter. It can also store your passwords locally to automatically fill in the fields in compatible applications. However, this password manager does not yet have cloud sync, so that could be improved. It also has a safe option to keep all your files private, and to access them, you must put your fingerprint again. Finally, if you lose your phone, you can have the option to search for your device, and you can try to find it by entering cloud.huawei.com. Remember that Huawei also has a privacy panel so you can see which applications have used your camera, microphone, or read your files. It also includes a pretty handy permissions manager and a private space that would allow you to have another phone inside your phone. A space with your own files, your own accounts, and everything separated from the main space. As you will notice, the only thing missing would be a child mode to lend this phone more safely to a little one. The battery is 4,500 milliamps. It seems that Huawei has given more priority to have a thin device than to have an ultra-large battery. However, Huawei is one of those manufacturers that tends to optimize its battery very well, and in my tests it performed much better than a 5,000 milliamp battery in other devices. To discharge it 50% with an extreme drain test that I always do, it took me about 3 hours with 39 minutes approximately. Whereas the average 5,000 milliamp battery devices give 2.5 hours. So I really have a very good battery experience with this device. It seems to manage background tasks very well so that they are not consuming so much power. Also, it does have a power saving mode, although it doesn't have an ultra power saving mode. However, it also offers automatic or manual management for background applications. So in battery life, I wouldn't worry too much because the device has very good features. Although I would definitely wish that through an update it would receive an ultra power saving mode, which we didn't find. However, the charging speed is something that makes life a lot easier because it has 100 watts of power and it really charges very fast. In 15 minutes, it recovered 58% of the power in the test that I did and charged from 0 to 100 in about 29 minutes. It's definitely a very fast charge, and today it's also worth noting that the charger does come included in the box. In addition, through software, you can know the current status of the battery condition, and it also has smart charging in case you are used to leave your cell phone charging all night to avoid damaging the battery. Or if not, it also has a charge limit that can be useful if you always have your cell phone connected because you need it to have power all day. You can lock the charge at 80% to prevent it from deteriorating. So the power management that this cell phone has seems to me to be completely good. The connectivity of the device is good but not excellent, since although it does integrate support for Wi-Fi 6 networks, it does not have support for 5G networks. At least here in Mexico, the 5G network is not really that fast. It is practically the same as 4G, so in Mexico there would be practically no difference, but in countries where the 5G is very well developed, you will feel a slightly slower experience. Something that should also be noted is that this device allows you to manually select which applications can access your mobile data and which applications can't, so you won't be surprised by the consumption of your data plan. It will also have NFC, although it does not have Google Wallet. Huawei also does not have its payment system developed for many countries. So even though it does have NFC, you may not be able to make payments using your phone with compatible banking terminals unless your bank's app supports it and that bank's app is in App Gallery. So there are really several steps to verify. It also doesn't have Android Auto, because even though Huawei has its own system for vehicles outside of China, it's not that common for vehicles to have this system. They usually only have Android Auto or Apple CarPlay, but do not have Huawei HiCar. However, you can do wireless projection of your screen to multiple monitors, but not to a Google Chromecast. Nor will you have the ability to project your display via an HDMI adapter. That's why I insist that connectivity is good, but not excellent. In the sensors, it's almost all good, because we do have an accelerometer, geomagnetic field sensor, gyroscope, and a good light sensor, but the proximity sensor is virtual, so it can be a little bit more complicated to get it enabled. When you put it near your ear, it does work, but it can cause some inconvenience. Finally, it also has gravity sensor, linear acceleration, rotation vector. So it has pretty much everything we could ask for, but we would prefer a physical proximity sensor. Huawei's ecosystem is one of the strongest points, offering something very solid, because we have a wide variety of devices that can interact perfectly with each other. If you bring in some free bots, they can connect very easily. You also have Huawei Share to send and receive files between cell phones of the same brand, or from a cell phone to a MatePad, or from a cell phone to a Huawei computer. Even with the Super Hub that I showed you a moment ago, we have this same super easy interaction. From the computer, you can also wirelessly access all the files on the phone. You can even use the phone directly from the computer. So the Huawei ecosystem is really very well developed. And not only with devices, but also with services. They offer Huawei Cloud with different plans so that you can back up your photos right there. They offer you a low amount for free, but you can extend it if you want to pay for a more advanced plan. Even the quick settings panel also shows you various devices that are interacting with it, and you can also install Huawei's app called AI Life, with which you can control more Internet of Things devices. Although specifically talking about this point, it's much more developed in China. But outside of China, it's a little bit more complicated to find an air conditioner or home appliances that are compatible with the Huawei ecosystem. But we will see how it is developing with the devices of the same brand Huawei. It's practically perfect. Let's go now to our app opening test. This device has the Snapdragon 778G processor, a processor that comes in a 4G edition, specially designed for Huawei. So the connectivity is not so advanced, but the power we could say is exactly the same as we see in other devices with this processor. In this case, we are doing a test of 16 applications so that we also test how the RAM is. For now, we are opening some more apps, and you realize that the opening can become good, although honestly it is not the fastest experience we have seen on devices. However, we're going to wait to finish getting all of these apps open, because we even have to note that some Google apps might take a little bit longer due to the virtual way they run. However, it looks like we are just about done. Approximately 3.3 seconds is how long it took to open each of these apps. As you realize, it's not the fastest we've seen. Hopefully also with some update, they will try to optimize this processor more, because really the processor is very good, but it seems that for some reason it does not feel so fluid and so fast. Even when scrolling in some apps, you realize that it can get to feel slightly clunky. But you yourself are seeing that the RAM is perfectly well utilized, because we haven't seen any app restarts and that we already have several apps open at the moment. So, the RAM is perfectly well utilized, but the processor still seems to be lacking in terms of further optimization. However, for day-to-day use, I think it is very good, because it does give us a fluid work without any reboots. So watch how we can switch between applications in a very easy and simple way. Now we are going to export a video by joining several clips recorded with this device with a total duration of 1 minute. We are going to export it also in 4K, and we are going to see how long it takes. In this case, this application seems that it is not so well optimized on Huawei devices yet, but hopefully soon they will optimize it to see more speed and more use of the processor. As you notice, it took practically 1.5 minutes too long, but possibly that's because the app is well optimized for Huawei's system. So let's give it a second chance now using the Petal Clips editor that already comes built in as part of the system. Although the workflow doesn't look very optimized, but let's see how long it takes to export, again applying 4K resolution. We already put it to work, and we really hope that by using Huawei's own developed application, you can have a little bit more speed. And that's it. It took 10 seconds less, but it's still a very long time, confirming to us that it seems that the processor is not very well optimized. Finally, regarding games, an application called Games Zone is integrated, although you must add it from the settings. Here we have our games collected, and we can also have the management of some of the special tools, such as an accelerator. We can also avoid notifications so that we are not interrupted in the middle of our game. We can also avoid involuntary actions like some gestures. In fact, it also has a lock for screenshots using 3 fingers and also disables knuckle gestures and automatic brightness. This in order to have a much more pleasant gaming experience. You could also connect some P40 accessories to it if you want to play with some more advanced formats. And when entering a game, we can swipe from the center to access some additional functions. For example, we can access some applications in a floating window mode to be able to answer messages. We can also take screenshots and video captures, and we also have some on-screen effects available to change the color calibration. But something that seems to me the most relevant is the control motions function, which allows us to map some buttons so that the action is performed when we turn the device. So, notice how in this case these 2 buttons are mapped and we can reposition them as we want. For example, we can make this button this way and this other button this way. And now just by simply rotating our device, we could enable this nitro option without necessarily pressing using our finger. But now let's go to our tests and notice that in Asphalt 9, this device does support 60 frames per second, and we selected it at the best possible quality. With this, it gave us 58 frames per second with 100% stability. The highest peak was 60 and the lowest 52, with a temperature on the outer lid at the end of the test of 38.9 degrees Celsius. Definitely this content is well matched. They look with good graphics and runs very smooth with no hitches, so this game really ran very well. PUBG by default loads the graphics settings with the HD quality at a high rate. However, for our test, we enabled some special filters with HDR at an ultra rate. In addition, we turned the smoothing up to 4x, and it should be noted that also if you lower the graphics quality, you can go all the way to an extreme rate. To start with, we played at an ultra rate with the graphics in HDR, and this gave us 40 frames per second on average, with 100% stability. The highest peak was 41 and the lowest peak was 35, with a temperature at the end of the test of 38.2 degrees Celsius on the outer lid, confirming to us that it seems to manage its temperatures very well so as not to overheat, even while maintaining good gameplay. With the frame rate setting on extreme, it gave us 59 frames per second on average, with 95% stability. The highest peak was 61 and the lowest 43, with an outside temperature of 39.2 degrees Celsius at the time the test was completed. It should be considered that the low peaks were simply at the start of the test. But in reality, the device behaved considerably well, although it did have some peaks that occurred continuously, but nothing really serious. Just if you're one of the more demanding gamers, you might notice some drops, but you're actually seeing for yourself that even when recording the screen, the device performs well. In Call of Duty, by default, it loads the graphics quality very high at a high rate. However, it does allow us to go up to a maximum rate. Also, having a Snapdragon processor, it also supports a lot of real-time effects. With this configuration, it gave us 60 frames per second on average, with 100% stability. The highest peak was 61 and the lowest 58, with a temperature on the outer lid at the end of the test of 38.8 degrees Celsius. Really, the device behaves very well in the performance we have. Simply, one thing that we might come to notice is that the touch sampling rate doesn't feel that high, and that in specs it does. So, here it could be again an optimization issue, because it does feel a little slow response when playing games. So, other than that, the graphics performance really seems to be very good, with good effects and also a very good fluidity. Finally, in Genshin Impact, this device by default loads in low quality, but for our test we bumped it up to high quality at 60 frames per second as well to take it to a more extreme test. Also consider that the screen recording is done separately, but it is definitely a device that can give us a good performance, although it is not a specialized gaming device, and for the price the processor could get a little old nowadays. However, it's still a processor that I consider efficient, although you're seeing for yourself that it's not without hiccups, especially in this content that's already much heavier. For the moment, we have reached the end of this video. I hope you liked it. If so, you know you can tell us, and we'll see you next time.